Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. I'm excited to talk to you today with a new friend, Jeff Perkins, who is the CMO of ParkMobile. And if you don't know ParkMobile, you're missing out. It's their 17 million users of this parking app that does many, many cool things. But what's most interesting about this is we're going to end up talking a lot about internal marketing in this episode. So Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Drew. This is great.
I'm excited to talk to you because, as we were talking in the preamble, a lot of times we could look at the growth of the organization from the time you got there, which was 7.5 million, to the time you are now, 2 years later, it got 17 million. That is awesome. But when I asked you what you were most proud of, you said looking inward. And I want to start at the beginning, if you would, when you arrived at the organization and decided to focus on employees first. What was your rationale and how did you sort of get started and get agreement from your CEO that this was the right place to start?
Right. So when I joined the company over 2 years ago, the company had been through a lot. We had some significant board changes, executive changes, a lot of turnover, and you could feel within the employees and the culture that there had been a little bit of just whiplash going on. People just didn't know where the company was going. Felt like they were just grinding every day to do a really good job, but there wasn't kind of this hope that you want to have in organizations, and there wasn't an excitement. And when I looked at the business before joining the company, I said, wow, this is a really exciting company. They're in these huge cities where they have tens of thousands of people using the app every day to do parking. They acquire hundreds of thousands of customers on a monthly basis. People really like the app. They had like a 4.9 out of 5 star review with hundreds of thousands of reviews in the App Store. So there was a lot of like really good stuff going on, but when you walk the halls, you wouldn't feel that, and you kind of felt like everyone was waiting for the next shoe to drop. And to me, we had to change that mindset. We had to realize that, yes, we have problems as a business. Yes, there were challenges that were facing us at the time, but they were the best kind of challenges. They were the best kind of problems. I remember one day where we had some technical challenges with the app. This was 2 years ago, and the app went down for a certain period of time, and that's horrible, right? When you're a consumer app that's used by thousands of people, you don't want the app to go down ever. And what happened was we just had so many people using the app, and we maybe didn't have the infrastructure at the time that scaled for our user base. And so people are really upset and people are down. And I remember saying in the room, I was like, guys, this is the best problem you can have.
Right. Yeah. Too many users. Yeah.
Like how awesome is this? We have so many people who want to use the app. They're crashing the app. Now, it's not good to have an app that crashes, but I rather have an app that crashes because too many people are banging on it than to have a really stable app that nobody is using.
Right. So, so you come in as it's a force of optimism. And you looked at the situation and obviously you didn't have a acquisition problem as my guess at that moment. It wasn't about that, but you had a morale issue that could have a long-term impact on the business. And as you saw it, we talk about that here, employees being the first at Renegade, that employees number one, because if they're not on board with a new branding effort, you're really in trouble because the customers aren't going to believe it, and certainly the prospects aren't. So we go and we say, all right, we have an employee. How did you assess the nature of the problem? Did you look at it like this is a strategic communications problem and we got to solve it, or and what was your process?
It wasn't that hard to figure out, and because I looked at whenever I join a company, I'm like a doctor. I have a checklist of things. Does the company have a, vision, mission? Do we have these things in place? And one thing I noticed that we didn't have at the time, we didn't have a clear vision for the business, and we didn't have clearly defined core values that we all lived by that determined our hiring, our firing, who gets promoted, who gets bonuses. And what I found at past companies is that if you don't have that foundation,
right,
you're not going to be successful within your company because you're going to be rudderless. People don't know where you're going. People don't understand what we're about and what we're for. So one of the first things that I did, and this was at our first, the first executive offsite I attended, is I led a core value workshop for the executive team. And we spent just about a full day talking about our vision, talking about core values. And we came out of the offsite with a very good draft of what we wanted our core values to be. And we refined them over the next couple of weeks. And then we had them and we published them and we put them on the walls and we made videos about them. We established what we call the core value awards every year. So we recognize the people who embody our core values. And I can't tell you, people have core values committed to memory at this company. Like people know, there's only 6 of them. People know all 6. And
did you create an acronym or something to make it easy for them to remember?
we did not. And unfortunately, a lot of our core values they have multiple words in them. So an acronym wasn't going to really work.
Right.
But at a high level, and I'll just tell you what they are: a healthy obsession with customer experience, act with integrity, sweat the small stuff, play well with others, rise and fall together, and support our people, support our community. So 6 fairly simple, easy to understand core values. And we do everything through a lens of those core values, right? So if someone is not sweating the small stuff in this company, maybe they shouldn't be in this company. When we're hiring, we ask people about how do you act with integrity, right? Tell me about how you work with others, because playing well with others is a core value of the company. And if they don't really pass the test, we will not hire that employee.
Right.
But I have to tell you, and I wish there was a quantitative way to really assess this. But once you had the core values in place, I think it made a huge difference on the organization. And we put the core values on the walls. Our CEO enforces the core values constantly. It just makes a difference because it's companies that are great have great people and great cultures. And it all starts with what your core values are and making sure that the organization understands that and every day are living those core values.
And by the way, I do think there's a way of measuring this, and it's funny in our process, and not trying to toot our horn, but it's really, you do essentially an employee satisfaction study on an annual basis, if not quarterly, and you do it before you change them, and then you do it afterwards, and you see certain things. Now you can ask, hey, do you know what the values are? But you can ask other questions that would say, how likely are you to recommend this as a great place to work to a best friend? Right. And you can create those things and you can see the lift. And is this a company that you really believe in? And when you add those, those are really easy, basic measures for doing that. And in fact, we've standardized about 7 of them that we do for all our clients because you get some interesting normative data in this. But where it really starts to show up is in customer satisfaction, where you see it's like in the call center, right? Suddenly the ratings of the customers go up because employees feel better about the brand that they're working for. Yeah, and it translates it. The other part of it is we've seen this, although it takes time, is your recruiting cycles are shorter. Mm-hmm. Because your yield is higher, right? The number of offers that you give versus the number of people who accept goes up, right, as the culture builds around it. So it's I couldn't agree with you more. I'm curious if, so once you had these values, because one of the things that's really tricky with values is I've always believed if you talk about them too much, it's like, Richard Nixon, I'm not a crook. You just by merely saying them, you don't make, it's not believable. You have to live them and show them. So the awards was a good example. I'm curious if there were other things that you did to help instill these values and make sure they really became real, as opposed to, again, a poster on a wall.
Yeah. So we do, we've done a lot of things in this area. We actually have a great video that's on our website where we talk to employees about what the core values mean to them. And it's really interesting when you ask people that are in the company, what's your favorite core value, or what core value do you identify with most? And they bring back some really compelling answers oftentimes. And you could see that it's very emotional for them. Mm-hmm. And it connects them to the company in a way that they probably weren't connected before. And one thing that I love when we're interviewing candidates, it's like my favorite thing. If anyone ever comes interviews with me, and listens to your podcast, hopefully they do this. I love when candidates come into an interview and tell me that they really identify with ParkMobile's core values. I think as an interviewee, it's the smartest thing you can do.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I've had, not every candidate does it. Most candidates don't. But when a candidate sits across from me and says, I spent some time on your website, I really like your core values as an organization, and I see myself being a good fit for this reason or for that reason, it shows me that that's the kind of person we want within the company, because they're not just looking at, oh, this looks like a cool company, or, oh, they have snacks and foosball and all this. They're saying the values of your company align with my values, and I want to be a part of your organization. I mean, that is everything for us. But I think the other part of your question is how do you get people to really live it? And that's the hardest thing in a company, is because it's a frequency game, right? It's about frequency and reinforcement. And so, in every company I've ever worked at, when you do employee surveys, the number one issue is usually around communication. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on. My boss doesn't tell me anything. Someone in another department made a decision that impacts me and I wasn't involved. I don't have visibility into this. I don't have visibility into that. And it's hard, and especially for a company like us that it has been growing pretty rapidly. So we've doubled our employee base over the last 18 months. It's really hard to keep everybody in the loop on everything going on. So one thing that we instituted, because we knew we were getting in employee surveys, we were getting feedback that communication was an issue. People felt out of the loop. So even if you are engaged in the core values, if you don't feel like you're in the loop on what's happening in the organization, you may become disenchanted to some extent, or just feel like you're disconnected from the overall company that you work with. So we started doing a weekly internal newsletter to all employees, a weekly internal newsletter to all employees. Now we're a small company. We don't have like a big internal comms team. But this newsletter, when we started it, was written by me. I did it in MailChimp, and I tried to make some funny jokes in it. But every week I would go through things happening across the company that everybody should be excited about. And I recognized employees who were living our core values. We talked about news, product releases. The idea was, we are going to give you more information than you probably need.
Right.
But we don't want anyone to feel out of the loop. We don't want to get bad scores on employee surveys around communication. So the philosophy here is that, hey, we're going to over communicate. And I think me doing the newsletter for a long time was really helpful, because I had more of an executive view of the company, and I see across the organization. So I could put together the right content for the company. A lot of times those internal newsletters, they get kind of, it's the junior comms person who gets assigned to do it. And they have a very narrow view. So everything that's in the newsletter is about, oh, what's the communication team doing, right? Whereas this was really an enterprise-wide newsletter that really talked about the things that were impacting the business. Now, it's not an easy thing to do. Writing a newsletter every week is very taxing.
And I want to stop for a second because we need to take a break.
Okay.
And two, I have so many observations that I want to get to. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now, for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now, let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back. And we were talking about sort of employee with, the first point I wanted to make was the fact that you did it with the executive team. Huge, really huge. You have to get executive buy-in on obviously things like mission and values. That was number one. Number two, you have to communicate it to employees. Then we started talking about how you personally were writing the newsletter. How many months did you do that?
I probably did it for the first 18 months.
Wow. Okay.
And never missed a week. Never missed a week.
So what that says to the organization is if the chief marketing officer is spending inevitably probably an hour, if not more, I mean, I know what it takes to write a newsletter since I write one every week. It's time consuming to put good quality together. So it says you're personally invested in it and you're living the values of it. And this is the most important thing on your list right now. So I can't, if you're going to go down this road and you're really going to embrace, this is a hard thing to delegate. The next thing that I thought was really interesting is you talked about the growth, and this is so interesting for smaller companies. How many employees did you go from when you arrived to where you are now?
We went from about 70, 75 to about 175 now.
Right. And all still in the same location?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So at least you have that advantage. But typically, the sort of family feel of a startup starts to break down, believe it or not, at about 40, and then 100 is a big threshold. And so those people who were there when the company was 70 versus those people who were, when you passed 100, suddenly there is this issue. I don't know everybody here anymore, right? I don't know what's going on. And they feel that. And while it's very exciting, there is that pain. And if you're at the top of this, you don't often think about it. And so the fact that you, again, were communicating all of this, I think it really says a lot. And certainly says a lot about how you spent, how important employees were to the process. I'm curious, if you look back at the last 2 years in terms of the employee programs, what do you think really worked well? And let's just start there.
Yeah. I would probably say the things that worked well were the activities that brought the company together more. And so in the past, we had a culture that I would say was probably more focused on getting the work done and getting out of here, and wasn't spending a ton of time together. Right. And that's okay. I mean, in a fast moving startup where you have limited resources, you really just have to go. And sometimes you sacrifice some of the personal things. But we brought in a VP of HR about a year ago. And I think she's done a great job in actually operationalizing our core values in a way that we probably didn't have the time and energy to do. So now we have every other week we have an all hands lunch, and where different teams share things. We have lunch and learns. Every Thursday we do a all company happy hour that's hosted by a different department. My department, when we did a Las Vegas theme, and we brought in blackjack tables and. But I think that the act of bringing people together in a company, especially a company like ours where we're moving very fast, you have a lot of developers who are working on stuff and marketers who are working on things, and finance people who generally don't all understand what other people do, and helping people connect and understand what everyone does, where we're going. I think those kind of activities have really helped the culture become much more cohesive, and, really turn this into a place that was, a place maybe people felt like they had to work, but to a place where people really feel like this is a place they like to work, they want to work, and that's everything. And you may see this, and I know probably most marketers today, the job market is super tight. It's hard to get great people. You're competing with every other company, usually in your city. Atlanta is a really tight market for developers and marketing people. So to have a great culture in your company where people are just geeked up to be there is everything, because people want to not just join a company. They want to join some organization that is about something, where they walk in and the place is buzzing and people are excited. I remember, I've been on my fair of job interviews in the past. There's nothing worse when you walk into the drab office where everyone's inside their offices, nobody's talking to each other. You come here and people are, sitting in the common area, chatting. Everyone's got their laptops up. People are whiteboarding everywhere. It's a real thing to see. And I think when we ask our employees, what's the one word you use to describe ParkMobile? Usually the most common word is fun. It's like a fun place to work, and not fun in it's all fun and games. Fun in that, like, we're getting stuff done, and we're growing the business, and we're driving revenue, and we're acquiring customers, and we're having a blast while we're doing it. And that, at the end of the day, that's where you kind of hit that nirvana point as an executive. You're like, wow, everyone's like, we're crushing our business and we're having fun at the same time.
Now, so that head of HR is Jenna?
Yes. Yeah. Jenna Brown.
Yes. So, and funny story for the listeners is that Jenna is the daughter of a longtime client and friend, Gene Kelsey, who is a really, just a great marketer and a great guy. So, hey, Gene, I know you'll be listening. Shout out. So what's interesting to me about that, and I actually brought that up for a reason, is increasingly I see CMOs who are successful. They have two big partners. One is HR. For the internal communications, and someone who really believes and shares the values that you're talking about. And the other is, of course, the CFO. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but I think that's really so important. And the fact, I'm imagining that you were part of the hiring process for Jenna.
Yes.
Right. And so when I see trouble, it happens in this way: is the CMO is gung-ho. They've got the big brand idea. They know how to communicate this internally, and what this brand is about, what the values of the organization. And the HR person says, "I got this."
Right.
And you hear, "I got this" from a fellow department head. Excuse me. They don't. And they're basically saying, whatever you think you're doing doesn't affect me, and I got this. And so that, I think, is a tremendous advantage. You were able to bring in someone who understood and shared those values. And so for those of you who have inherited an HR person, figure out how you can help them. I mean, they're
I mean, you're exactly right. And we do that across a lot of our teams here. So I'm involved sometimes in hiring for our product team, not always an executive, sometimes a mid-manager. We're just bringing on a new COO in the near term. That person met with all the executives extensively. And but I think a good practice is generally to not just have someone come in and meet with maybe their direct report or their direct boss, but really do a circuit. I remember I was interviewing a bunch of software testers that they were bringing in, but it was great because I don't have the technical knowledge, but I do understand the culture and the company, right, and the type of person who will be successful here. And I think that feedback was valued by the technology team.
And one of the things that you mentioned about bringing people together, I mean, you do have an advantage. Everybody's in the same building, in the same city. So many of the companies that software developers in particular, they've got a group that's in development, perhaps overseas. They've got, marketing in New York. And it's a lot harder for those organizations to sort of actually bring people together. But the notion of it, so you do virtual town halls, you find ways to fit, to try to actually connect. I thought it was particularly interesting, your idea of having different departments host it, because, we do know that the developer folks tend to be a different type of individual, right? They just are versus say marketing. It's a cliche to say extrovert, introvert, but they're just different and they don't always appreciate each other in an organization. So it's nice, again, if you give each of them a chance to be in the spotlight. And so the marketing person goes, oh, that makes sense. That's kind of cool what that developer doing. Or the developer can say, oh, that marketing, I get that. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, we're doing something this week, actually. We just kicked it off. We've done it several times. We call it Innovation Week. Mm-hmm. And we give our teams, and it started in development, but then we realized other people in the company wanted to do it. We give people basically a week to go work on stuff they're interested in. And I mean, it has to relate to the company, obviously, and it has to, but we have people all over the company today who are all huddling up in conference rooms, and people from different departments, and they're teaming up to come up with really cool ideas for the business. And next week we have kind of our Shark Tank judging panel coming in, where these teams are going to pitch their ideas, and they get awards based on who has the best idea, who has the most innovative idea, who has the idea that is feasible, that we could execute right now. And it's a really cool event that I think the entire company is kind of rallied behind as a way to continually push innovation and ideas and give teams that are, grinding through challenging issues day in and day out, a little breathing room to go and explore and experiment and do some new things, try out some new toys, try out some new tech tools. And it's just really cool. And as an executive team, it's challenging because you say, all right, we have a roadmap and we have deliverables, and but at the same time we see it as as necessary. You can't just grind people to death, right? I mean, if our developer talent or our marketing talent or our product talent, if they just feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and if they have there's no way for them to get their great idea to the surface, they'll eventually leave or they'll burn out. Whereas this gives them that outlet, and it also helps the company from a cultural standpoint just rally around this, and it really brings together different people from different departments to work on complex issues. So it's really become, I think, a signature part of who we are as a company and how we operate these innovation weeks.
That's very cool. All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk and dissect that a little bit more as well. So stay with us.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back, and we've been talking about a really interesting idea. I mean, I know Google gives people, like 10%, some amount of time per month to do it, but to take everybody, if you will, offline, to take them, I mean, they have an entire week to do nothing but this, or is it half of their time? How do you manage that so business keeps moving forward?
They really have an entire week. Now, the idea is you get your work done before the week, right? And so you have that clarity. It's like going on vacation. You finish your work before you go on vacation. You take a week off. This is similar. You finish your deliverables, and that gives you that free week to go work on something really cool and interesting that you want to work on and that you think is going to help the company.
So, and I love this idea. And, we're talking about building a culture of innovation, and people talk about that, but you really, again, it's something that you have to make real, and committing an organization to say, hey, all of you are on the innovation team. We're going to dedicate a week to this. Questions that I'm thinking that CMOs might ask you is, well, one, you've already answered, is everybody has to get their work done beforehand. That's tricky. How do you sort of assemble? Do people self-assemble, or do you, like, because it'd be ideal in like a sprint team, you'd want a developer, you'd want a marketer, you'd want a data person, and, to bring to, how did you organize this?
We've done this a few times now, and so it's been a lot of trial and error, but teams kind of figure out what they want to work on, and they go find other people that are interested in that. And so sometimes people will just throw out there, hey, I'm going to do this new advanced analytics algorithm thing, and I'm looking for 3 people to help me out. And people are really interested. Some people are not as interested in coming up with the idea. Mm-hmm. They just want to contribute and help. Sure. There are some people who say, hey, I'm not technical, but I could help you present and write and make a really good PowerPoint deck that people are going to get excited about.
Right.
So it's interesting to see these teams develop, and it's a lot of people who end up complementing each other. But usually there is one person that has the big idea for the project, and a lot of people go all in with that person on it. But most of the teams are, probably the smallest team is 3. Sometimes the biggest team could be up to 10 people working on these things. But it's really fun. I mean, the highlight for me is seeing what they come back with, because they come back sometimes with real working prototypes. I mean, last time one of our developers came up with this little widget that actually worked, and we were like, our sales guy was like, hey, I could sell that tomorrow. Could I bring that to a client? I got a client meeting tomorrow. And we're like, slow down, dude, slow down.
Yeah, right.
But that's really what makes it fun for the employees. It makes it fun for the executive team to see our employees bringing these big ideas, and really having pride and ownership of them. And that's, at the end of the day, when you're working at a company and that gives you that opportunity, hopefully that's going to make you very satisfied as an employee.
So if I've got a bunch of CMOs listening, and they're thinking, oh my God, we're going to commit a whole week to innovation. What were some of the sort of key things that you did to get executive buy-in? For example, I can imagine piloting something like this. That would be one way, but tell me sort of, again, what are some mistakes maybe that you made early on that you think you could sort of help some CMOs not make?
Yeah, so I want to give full credit to Matt Ball, our CTO. This was his baby, but I'm so proud of it. I like to talk about it.
Right, that's cool.
And as an executive here, we collectively gave him the green light that said, hey, your team can take the time they need to do this. And when they did it the first time, it was only technology people, and then now it's really evolved to be the entire company. And a lot of the finance people do it, and the marketing people, and which is fantastic. Even our HR team sometimes jumps in and does some of the projects as well. So it's really open to everybody. I think what we've learned from the past IO weeks has been that you want to really push on innovation. That's the goal. But at the same time, you want to encourage people also to do things that are realistic, that we can execute as a company. So there have been some great ideas that have come up at these IO weeks, but then you look at the ideas after the fact and what it would take to actually execute, and you're like, well, we really can't do that. or we could do that, but it's going to cost this amount of money, and that's just not feasible. So this year, actually, for this current Innovation Week, one of the real focus areas is on tangible things that we can do in the short term. Mm-hmm. So we actually really focused them this time. And that's even one of the awards is based on what's the project that is most likely to be executed in market, right?
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things, because at the end of these weeks, it's a big investment from the company. in labor hours and employee resources. So you want to be able to get something out of it beyond just a morale program. You do really want to start bringing some of these ideas to market. And so hopefully with some of that direction this time around, we'll see some ideas that we can take right out of Innovation Week and then put into practice in the business.
I wonder if marketing's role in this could be to use your sort of, say, social listening and other customer feedback from customer service to say, hey, these are some of the problems we'd like you to address as well. Is that part of this?
Yeah, that's a big thing, especially this current Innovation Week. We have a theme, and it's customer delight. So that's another new thing we've done, is introduce a theme to it. So all of the projects that people are going to come back with should be very focused on how is this delighting our customers? How is it making them more excited about ParkMobile, more loyal to ParkMobile? So I'm really curious to see, given that additional direction beyond just innovation, because when you say innovation, it's pretty wide, right?
Right.
But customer delight is a big one, because we know that through our research, the customers that are more engaged with ParkMobile are more loyal, are using the app more, less, and so that the more things we can do to create those loyal, raving fans of ParkMobile, the better our business is going to be in the future.
Yeah, and I suspect there's sort of two ways about this. Also, the other way would be, what are the areas where we have the biggest pain points, right? But part of this I'm imagining is, I don't use the app because I don't park in New York City, right? And I might have a car, but I just don't have that issue that often. But if you were someone who was commuting all the time or going to sporting events all the time, you would have a need for the app. So I think a lot of it depends on the nature of your driving behavior, right? And so part of satisfaction is, I use this all the time because I need it all the time. Right. And then that's part one. And then part two is, I need it all the time. I use it all the time, but this thing irritates me, fix it. So interesting. Yeah. As we sort of wrap up this, from one of the things that I just wanted to ask about is, some companies just celebrate the successes, and which is great innovation, but sometimes if you don't fail, the old saying is, you're not trying hard enough. And so I'm curious, in any of this, do you have any mechanism for, we tried it, it didn't work out, but God bless you for, bringing that to the table?
The great thing that I've enjoyed about a career in marketing is that it's all about failure to some extent, right? Because you don't succeed unless you figure out what doesn't work and what does work. And believe me, I've had many epic fails in my career, and continue to here, as we kind of learn our way into what is an optimal marketing program for this business, and that changes every 12 months based on new tactics and new programs. It's funny. I think probably the biggest failure I've had here, and I had it early on, fortunately, and it's really helped me a lot. It was that because we have an app, and it's in your, we're in people's pockets, and we have their data, and we have their email. We know where they're going a lot of times. We know where they're parking. We know what their billing zip code is. So we have a lot of data about our customers, and that's pretty powerful as a marketer. I know where you are and where you're going, and I could do a lot to constantly message you and constantly stay in touch with you. And we had a bunch of fails early on when we abused that. Yeah. And I'll give you a few examples. The Houston Astros, when they won the World Series a few years ago, I thought that was great. We have a lot of users in Houston. I'm going to congratulate the Houston Astros for winning the World Series and do a push notice in the app to all of our users. So we push, congratulations, Houston Astros World Series champions. And we got a ton of blowback on social media for that. Like, why is ParkMobile congratulating the Houston Astros? That makes no sense. So that was kind of an interesting lesson. And then we sent people during the holidays a happy holidays from ParkMobile. And we got more blowback on, Why? The last thing I need is a happy holiday email from my parking app. and I think through some of that experimentation, I learned something important, which was we were having very poor self-awareness as a brand in what our role is in the life of our users. And that's something that is really important for a marketer to understand, because if you don't have that self-awareness and you abuse the communication channel, they're going to turn you off. They're going to delete you as an app. They're going to look at you unfavorably as a business. And so now we're very careful, and we kind of have a clear guide for how we engage with our users. And what we try to look at in every piece of communication, especially ones that are going through the app and could be intrusive in some ways, is it adding value to them as they're on whatever journey they're on to get from point A to point B to where they're parking. And so I'll give you a few examples of where our messaging program is really effective. One is if you are traveling from New Jersey and you're driving down to Washington, D.C., and you have the ParkMobile app, as you enter the DC market, you'll get a pop-up that says, hey, ParkMobile is available all over DC. You can use the app here to park. So, really nice way to just inform people, hey, an app you have works in this market and you can, right? So that was one. The other thing is when people travel they have the app and they maybe fly to a new location and they land at the airport. We used to actually, as soon as you land at the airport, you would get a pop-up that says, hey, ParkMobile's in this market. And we heard from consumers that, well, thanks for telling me ParkMobile's here, but I'm taking Uber all over town.
Right.
So we said, all right, let's not geofence the airport. Let's geofence the rental car facility.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So just getting a lot smarter in ways that you can provide information that adds value to the consumer without being too intrusive and without violating that relationship you have with the user. And that's always been very important to me, because the last thing we want to do is, piss someone off to the point where they delete the app or so they just vent on social media. Because, we know that our app is a utility. Right. And you're not we're not Facebook, we're not Peloton, we're not a passion brand. We're a utility. You use us to park and then you get on your way. And by having that self-awareness, it really informs the way we do marketing and the kinds of programs we do. And we're very focused on not being intrusive, but adding value to the consumer.
Yep, we call that marketing as service. Just if anytime you can turn marketing into something that is of legitimate value in the conversation, it's a win-win. This has been amazing. I really enjoyed this and getting a deep dive into as a CMO, focusing your attention on your internal audience for the most part. And I'm curious if we had to wrap this up in if you had 2 do's and a don't. We have a bunch of CMOs who are they're new on the job. They know they have to deal with what you had to deal with. Give them 2 do's and a don't for building a strong employee, we'll call it employee engagement program.
Okay, so the 2 do's, the first do is if you don't have core values, or if your core values are just words on a wall, really think about updating them, redoing them, or figuring out a way to really bring those core values to life. Because I truly believe it's the core values of the organization are foundational to the success of the organization. And if you don't get that right, it's going to be challenging. So we're, as companies, we're all about our people, and so by having those values that you live by and work by, it's critical. The second thing is you can never over communicate. So as a marketing team, we're experts usually in communication. We need to be very active in making sure we're not just communicating outside the company, but also communicating inside the company. So making sure employees understand what's going on, what the priorities are, what's important. And if you have to, as a CMO, roll up your sleeves and do that weekly newsletter, go for it. Because I will tell you, being able to get people on the same page in your organization and aware of what's going on is just critical to success. And I think the don't for me is back to my last point I was talking about. Don't don't, let me just think, don't violate the relationship you have with your customer or your consumer. Understand the role you have in their life and provide value to them when you can, but don't just message them because you're able to. And because you have these cool MarTech tools that enable you to geofence and geo-target and retarget them. When it comes to your marketing program, really figure out how to add value and what in your business is adding value, and everything else, just get rid of it.
Love it. What a great place to wrap up the show. Thank you so much for joining with us and sharing your expertise. Congratulations on your success so far. And to the listeners, hope you enjoyed this episode. Really tried to do a deep dive on one subject. I think that we covered a lot of territory: getting executive buy-in, building values, communicating on an ongoing basis, building a culture. Just in case you were wondering, I think I noticed that you were recognized as a top place to work in Atlanta. That's one of the ways. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention, I noticed you're a Springsteen fan. Early on, I interviewed several years ago a guy by the name of Stephen Handmaker, who is at an insurance company, who's a huge Springsteen fan as well. You've been to what, 27 concerts?
30 plus.
30 plus. Okay.
Can you indulge me for a second on my
Yes.
Springsteen? Can I geek out a bit?
Please.
Huge Springsteen fan. I've been seeing him forever. When I met my wife, one of the qualifications, like in the first 2 months, I took her to a Springsteen concert to see if she was going, could qualify, potentially to be my spouse. Because if she didn't like it, it wouldn't have worked out. But the interesting thing, because Springsteen has an interesting role in my career. I wrote a blog one time after a Springsteen show, and I think the blog title was "What Would Springsteen Do?" 5 lessons from the boss. And it was, and so I wrote it and I posted it on my blog and on LinkedIn. And, a lot of people commented, especially the Springsteen fans. A few years later, I'm interviewing for a job. It would be my first CMO job. And I'm interviewing with the CEO, and we had a good interview and kind of walked away thinking, I think that went pretty well. Sent him the thank you note. And then he replied back to me right away. And he said, OMG, I just read your What Would Springsteen Do story. I've seen him 50 times. Darkness on the Edge of Town is my favorite. And so I got that CMO job.
Well, there you go. Just because of Springsteen. I love that. Well, you're going to have to send me a link to that post. I'll send you, and in the show notes, we will include your post as well as the article that I wrote. I think I used all the points were songs of Springsteen as well. And I know Stephen Handmaker is going to get a big kick out of this as well. So, all right. Well, clearly we could talk for a long time, but we need to wrap this up because the folks commute. We just hit 45 minutes, and that's as long as they travel, because right now they're probably looking at the app, finding their parking spot. So with that, thank you again for being on the show. Also, listeners, thank you. If you enjoy the show, as always, please do me a favor. Send me a note. You know how to get a hold of me and suggest another topic that you think I should do a deep dive in. Finally, rate the show. Go while you're there downloading ParkMobile. Go ahead to go to iTunes and rate the show. All right. With that, until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.